There are no downsides to a side hustle. There are only benefits to building more than one source of income. Forbes. You have the power to be the boss of your own life. I'm your host, Monica Allen. I'm a wife, mom, entrepreneur, best-selling author, lifelong learner, and your biz bestie. I have a love and passion for all things small business. Growing my own company from $700 to over 7 figures annually, my goal is to bring you inspiration, business-focused topics and tips, encouragement, and a community that helps you launch, grow, and scale your business, whether you are a dreamer, a side hustler, or a seasoned entrepreneur. You are listening to the Become Your Own Boss podcast. This week's episode is brought to you by the Simple Life Assessment. Every entrepreneur needs an occasional reset. In just a few minutes, the free assessment will help you identify where you're thriving, where you may need to recalibrate, and how to live with greater intention. Take the assessment today at simple.monicaallen.com and start becoming the boss of your entire life, not just your business. You can also see the link in the show notes for the assessment. This past weekend, I was talking to one of my sorority sisters. She's working full-time while building a baking business on the side. She told me something that I think every side hustler has felt. She said, and I'm paraphrasing, between my job, trying to market my business, and actually baking the orders that come in, I don't know how to do it all. I don't have enough time. I smiled because I remembered exactly what that season felt like. When Ethan and I started our business, we weren't full-time entrepreneurs. We both had jobs. We had responsibilities, we had bills, and we were trying to build something that one day we hoped could replace our paychecks. It wasn't easy, but looking back, there are several decisions that made all the difference. Today, I want to share those. I know some of you out there are already full-time bosses, but if you're building a business while working a full-time job, this episode is for you. And if you're like me, where I am a full-time boss, but still have side hustles, this episode is for you too. Number 1, decide what you actually want. This is at the top of the chart here. The first thing I had to figure out was this. Did I simply want extra income, or was I trying to build a future business that I would work in full time? There is a distinct difference, and they require 2 completely different goals. There's nothing wrong with a side hustle that simply pays for vacations, gives you extra spending money, helps pay off debt, or perhaps you can use for investments or retirement income in the future. But if your dream is eventually leaving your job, you have to build differently. You can't casually grow a business that is expected to replace a full-time income. Once I decided I wanted to become an entrepreneur and leave my 8-year insurance career, I had to think about every move a little differently. The time I invested changed. The money I invested changed. The goals changed. Truthfully, I wasn't ever really building a hobby because I knew since about 4th grade that I someday wanted to own my own business. But when I got the market validation around what we were selling, my mind completely thought, I can turn this into a full-time thing. But how do I do this? And I had to set that intention because I wanted to build my future livelihood. Ask yourself, if you're in this position, what am I actually building? What do I actually want? Do I want this to remain a side hustle for extra income, or do I want to build it into something that can replace my current full-time income? Number 2, time doesn't magically appear. We entrepreneurs somehow don't find extra hours in the day. We simply use the hours differently. I spent lunch breaks working on my business. I can remember that I would go sit in my car to make phone calls to vendors and customers. I would order garments on my lunch break for orders that we needed to fulfill. Evenings and weekends became work sessions. I worked on marketing the business, shipping out orders, and emailing customers. I really did not have a lot of free time. I did try to continue to work out, but that was really the only extra thing that I did. While other people were watching television or sleeping in on Saturday mornings, I was focused on building the business. Did it require sacrifice? Absolutely. There was sometimes I could not go hang out with my friends or do certain things, but I knew the sacrifice was temporary. I just needed to spend the time building at that moment. Now, there is a bit of a caveat here with me because Ethan and I were in it together. We spent a lot of time working together to build this business. If you're not in it with your partner, be it your spouse or your boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever the case may be, that's taking away time from your family or from those relationships while you build. And that can be difficult. But I have found when I've talked to other people who are in that situation, and I also noticed this once we added kids into the mix, communication is the key. Talking about the big picture goals together and determining what it's going to take to get there, and just ensuring that you have somebody who's supportive of that, because that can be very difficult. Being an entrepreneur is difficult. It does require communication to make sure that everyone's on the same page. And in some cases, for people to understand, like, this is a temporary sacrifice of time I'm going to have to put in. And yeah, the picture may not be completely the way you envision it down the road, but just communicating what you think it's going to look like. I'm going to have to work these extra hours to move the gauge this way. Time does not magically appear. It will require some sacrificing of not Netflixing and chilling and things like that. Number 3, you can't do everything. Here's something I wish more side hustlers understood, or even for me, just because you're capable of doing everything doesn't mean you should, especially when time is limited. It goes back to time. So you have to ask yourself, what actually grows my business and what simply keeps me busy? You want to eliminate the things that are just keeping you busy. Maybe you're spending hours creating the perfect logo. Your logo doesn't have to be perfect. When you really need to find customers instead, maybe you're redesigning your website for the 10th time. It doesn't need that. Instead of following up with leads, perhaps you're spending hours putting together a reel to post. I know sometimes I spend way too much time doing that. I actually don't post quite as much anymore because it did take up a lot of time. And that can lead to business, but if you already have leads, following up on that is key. And growth activities deserve your best hours. If you know that after you get off of work, you need 2 hours or an hour to decompress and just come down off of that, then take that, but then commit to say, I'm going to work an hour every single Monday, Wednesday on marketing. I'm going to work every Tuesday, Thursday on promoting in a different way. But figuring out what works best for you is going to be key. For the young lady who has a baking business, of course, you're fulfilling those orders. And a lot of times those orders are dependent on when that event is. So are you only baking on the weekends? Are you having to bake during the week, and what days work best? What times work best? So determining those things are going to be individual because we're all very different. I used to be a night owl. I could stay up to 2 and 3 a.m. I can't do that anymore. My body shuts down at about 11:30, 12. I've had to adjust. I'm much more of a morning person. I'm more awake in the mornings. I get more done probably within the first 4 hours in the morning. I can get more done than I can the rest of the day. So you have to determine what works best for you with having that full-time job. The key here is to focus on revenue producing activities. It is so easy to do the admin work. I still get sucked into the admin work, but that revenue producing activity will make the difference. That being said, ask yourself, what are my revenue producing activities? Write them down. And when you find yourself kind of stuck in the mundane, stuck in the admin, do one of those activities from the list. Just pick one and do it, because the reward will come from being consistent on the revenue producing activity. Point 4, you want to build systems early. Now, I talk about systems a lot. It comes up when I'm talking to other entrepreneurs. It's because is so important. One mistake I see people make is waiting until they're overwhelmed before creating systems. Instead, document everything. Document how you take orders. For my baking friend, document how you bake a particular type of cake. Of course, that's probably a recipe, but there may be some nuances to it. I don't really know much about baking. I'm not good at it at all, but documenting everything. Create email templates and reuse them. Do not reinvent the wheel each time. If you use Google Workspace, you can store up to, I believe, 20 or 30 email templates, which is such a time saver. And I know a lot of people start their businesses with just, their name at gmail.com. That is not Google Workspace. Google Workspace is not free email. It does cost something annually. I think it runs maybe $14.99 a month. And then there's, you can get it a little bit cheaper if you pay for it annually. But there's so many things in Google Workspace that can help your business save time. And it also gives you a professional email address. So your info at whatever your business is.com or admin at thatbusiness.com or your name at thatbusiness.com. Those types of things lend to, I'm kind of off topic a little bit here, but those types of things lend to you looking more professional. But it also gives you things like the opportunity to set up email templates that you can use over and over again when you're answering the same question or you're sending similar invoices or things like that. That type of thing will save you time. Also use scheduling software. That can save you a lot of time. Set up automatic invoices if you have software to do that. And you want to keep your customer information organized. You don't necessarily have to invest in a customer relationship management system right at the start of your business, also known as a CRM system. But keeping track of your customers, even in a spreadsheet or just something to start, will be very helpful. You want to collect their names, their contact information, their preferences, depending on what your business is. There may be specific preferences you want to keep up with. Their birthdays, if you think you want to send them a coupon or just a happy birthday for them to remember you. But this information at some point can be imported into a CRM down the road. That's why I often recommend a spreadsheet, because a spreadsheet can be easily imported and the contact tags can be easily migrated into most CRM systems. Every system you build today saves you time tomorrow. So remember, you're not just building a business. You're building a business that can eventually operate without everything living inside your head. It is great to do this too, because when a system lives in your head, you can sometimes forget the steps. So it's best to document those. Number 5, protect your reputation. This is especially important. You don't want to grow too fast and not serve your customers well. And I know everyone wants more customers. That is what drives revenue. But customers who receive poor service rarely come back. So we want to make sure we are delivering exceptional service to our customers. And sometimes the best decision is to limit orders or extend turnaround times. You can also raise your prices, which I know sometimes can be a little scary when you're starting. But let's talk about these for a minute. Limiting your orders can create a sense of urgency. It can also create a sense of missing out if you only have so many spaces available or so many slots open to produce whatever it is you produce or to provide whatever service you produce in a given month or a given week. So creating that sense of urgency can be helpful. When it comes to extending your turnaround times, it's important to be honest with your client or customer and let them know how long something's going to take. When we initially started our business, we could produce orders pretty quickly. But as we grew, and as production became busier, we still had limited machine capacity. We had limited production hands, and everything we make has to be touched by a human being. I often would tell my customers, trust me, if I could press print, I would, but it doesn't make for an embroidered item if I could just press print. That being said, we had to extend our production times and communicate that to our customers. Also, when you're in a business and you're so overwhelmed, and you're trying to juggle the full-time job, raising your prices can be an option because you don't necessarily need that income to survive. I'm certain that it helps, but if you're overwhelmed, raising your prices will reduce demand, at least for a while. But what's really exciting is when you raise your prices and it doesn't actually reduce demand. It may reduce it for a couple of weeks, but then people just adjust, and then you're making more money, and then you may have to raise it again. Anyway, cross that bridge when you come to it, but that is an option. As a business owner, growth is truly exciting. Whenever we launch a new product or service, I am extremely thrilled when someone purchases that new product or service because that goes back to that market validation piece. But remember, your reputation is priceless. I like to say under promise, but over deliver. Next point, give yourself grace. One thing I want every side hustler to hear me say, you're doing the work of two careers. You're working on two things, your full-time job and your business. That is hard. There will be seasons when you feel exhausted. I can literally still remember crying one late night at the office. It was 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. in the morning from sheer exhaustion. We were completing some orders. And this was back in the early days. This was when I had my full-time job. I was working, getting up early, going to that. And afterwards, I go and we make the products. Again, everything has to be touched. I was exhausted and I just broke down, crying. I was so burnt out. And Ethan told me, he said, just quit. Just turn in your 2-week notice tomorrow. But I didn't do that because I knew it wasn't the right time. And I'm a planner. I wanted to be better prepared. I also didn't want my manager to be left in 2 weeks with no options at the time. So I sucked it up for about 8 more months until it was the right time for me to leave my full-time position. And then I even gave a full month's notice because I knew that it would help my manager to train my replacement. And it was also great because I could see the potential of making revenue that we needed to make to replace my full-time income at that point. So that was a better time for me to leave than me operating off of that emotional exhaustion. There will be weeks also when you don't accomplish everything you planned. Give yourself grace. I truthfully still have those weeks. I go into every single week with these things that I want to get done, and I just don't get them all done, but it's okay. I still move the needle a bit. Don't confuse slow progress with failure. It is not failure. You just have to keep moving. Small steps, repeated consistently, become big results over time. So give yourself grace. I know I keep saying that, but give yourself grace. Be patient with yourself. And how does the saying go? Rome wasn't built in a day. Your business is not going to be built in a day. It takes time to build. I'm still building. I've been doing this for 20 something years, but I'm still building. But that building really excites me. So it should be exciting for you. Point 7, know when it's time to make the leap. People sometimes ask me, when should I quit my job? Truthfully, I cannot answer that for you. But for me, it wasn't an emotional decision. It was a financial and strategic decision. I didn't wake up one morning and hope everything would work out. We planned, we saved. I think having at least 6 months of income to cover all of your expenses should be a minimum. A year's worth of income would be great. That will really require some penny pinching, growing your business, putting aside some of your full-time income while also putting aside a lot of the income you're making from your side hustle. But that gives you time to build and focus and not worry about how you're going to pay the electric bill or the rent or the mortgage if you have money set aside to take care of those things. Ethan and I looked at our numbers. We asked whether the business could consistently support us. And once we saw that it could, truthfully, Ethan left his job a year before I left mine. I had the benefits, that type of coverage. And it gave us time to better prepare leaving my job. And truthfully, leaving your job to pursue that side hustle as a full-time business should be exciting. It should not be reckless. You should not walk into it stressed about, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? So take your time, save, plan. If you're listening today while working a full-time job and building your dream after hours, I want you to know this. Many successful entrepreneurs started exactly where you are. I consider myself a successful entrepreneur. Has it always been easy? No, not at all. But I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't trade it. Working during the day, building at night, wondering if all the sacrifice would eventually pay off. It definitely can, but only if you're intentional. You have to decide what you're building. You have to protect your time. You have to focus on activities that create growth in your business, build systems, serve your customers well. And remember that many successful full-time businesses were once someone's side hustle. The question is, are you treating yours like the future you want or just something you do when you have extra time? And again, there is nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having your side hustle be something you do when you have extra time. So I don't want you to think I'm judging you on that. There's nothing wrong with that, if that's your intention, if that's what you want. Thanks for listening today. I'm grateful for you. If you found value in today's episode, I'd love for you to share it with another side hustler who needs the encouragement. Take a moment to rate and review the podcast. And if you haven't already, subscribe so you never miss an episode. Remember, the future you're hoping for is being built by the choices you make today. And remember, now is the time. Now is the time to level up, leave a legacy, and become your own boss.